Hey, welcome to this crisp early October morning here in my garden. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about pre-winter preparations and what I'm planning to do this winter. Um, and the reason why I'm releasing this video now is that you take the opportunity to subscribe to Mirai Live before next Tuesday. Next Tuesday there will be a stream on the same subject by Ryan Neal, who for sure will approach the subject with much more knowledge and insight than I can ever hope for. So in any case, I'll share my thoughts with you now, because many people ask me to discuss what I will do and what can be done and what should be done. But for sure, please subscribe to Bonsai Mirai. You can subscribe for free for a week. It's the best investment you can do for your bonsai. Better than a pot. It's for the cost of one pot, you will get much more in a year. In any case, about winter. So, depending where you are, you have temperate trees in your collection. I will not be discussing much about tropicals. I will just mention what I do with mine. But different species are different. Even what we call, I live here in Montreal, and even what we call tropical here, there are tropical and tropical. Some tropicals are more tropical than others. A ficus, for example, compared to a coprosma kirki, or to a cerisa, or to a Eugenia uniflora, or to a Olea europea. These are all different species with different resistance to cold. But when we speak about temperate trees, they need winter dormancy. And that means that during that period, the trees will be metabolically inactive, and I don't quite understand the physiological molecular mechanisms of winter dormancy, but I understand that if you do not provide winter dormancy to a tree that requires it, it will keep burning resources over winter that will create a deficit over the growing season every year, and in a matter of 3-4 years your tree will die. So when we speak about winter dormancy, we need to speak about chilling units, and this is a measure that was developed to determine how much dormancy a tree needs. Now, this is mostly developed for fruiting trees. For example, an apple tree needs 10,000 hours or 10,000 units of chilling, and a unit of chilling is 1 hour at a temperature between 35 and 45 Fahrenheit, or around 2 degrees Celsius. The higher you go, up to 7 degrees Celsius, an hour will contribute half a unit. Above 15 degrees Celsius, your contribution is negative. And below freezing, your contribution is 0. So for example, here in Montreal, where we have very harsh winters, all the chilling units that our trees obtain are from late fall and early spring. All the middle of winter, which is very harsh with temperatures far below 0, they don't count. If you live in a more mild winter, then you will have more chilling units, actually, depending on where your temperature is, and they will be more accumulated over the middle of winter, because naturally, if you have a milder winter, you will have a milder or warmer fall that will not contribute to the chilling units, and a warmer spring that also will not contribute to chilling units. So your contribution to chilling units in a milder place will be more concentrated in the middle of winter, whereas here in Montreal it's more spread in fall. Winter doesn't contribute, spring. So it's important to keep your trees and give them the chilling that they require. So right now, today is a morning at 2 degrees. We're starting to have nights that get colder and colder. My tropicals are still coming outside today. Tropicals in quotation marks. A night like today that was near freezing, my tropicals spent the night inside of this porch. So here I have natal plum, carissa. I have here cerisa. I have here Chinese privet, coprosma, an elm cutting, cotonaster, more coprosmas, cerisa cuttings, all sorts of cuttings of coprosma, cerisa, grevia occidentalis. So they spent the night here, and this place is a 3-season porch, and in the winter for winter I will cover these windows with a plastic sheath that creates an isolation, an air barrier, and together with those heaters I managed to keep this place at 2 degrees throughout the winter. I use a unit like this. It's from Inkbird, and it allows me to maintain both control of humidity and temperature. So the heaters turn on when the temperature goes below 2 degrees and turns off when the temperature goes above 3.5, something like this. I don't remember the exact settings that I have. The humidity gets connected to the fan, so the fan starts running when the humidity becomes higher, and I have a dehumidifier to maintain the humidity, which the dehumidifier has its own on-off temperature control. What's important about a dehumidifier is that it is a desiccant dehumidifier, and this is the brand I use, Ivation. You can find it in Amazon. What's important why is it important to be a desiccant dehumidifier is that it has a heating element inside, and the heating element is what allows it to essentially it evaporates the water inside of the element, and then it condensates and is captured and removed from the air. The normal dehumidifiers that you have work more or less like a refrigerator, and in that case it freezes when it's very close to freezing temperature. So it's very important that it's not a standard dehumidifier, but desiccant dehumidifier. So these trees are all coming out today because we have another 2 weeks perhaps with good conditions outside. All these trees that I have, they are tropicals, but they are not like a ficus. They can withstand temperatures up to down to 5 Celsius without a problem at all. Here I have an Eugenia uniflora, pitanga, or I think it's also called Suriname cherry. It's spent the night at 2 degrees, no problem. This tree can withstand temperatures down to freezing. Here I have Olea europea, also spend the night outside, no problem. And so there is no point. Why bring all these tropicals, or rather than saying tropical, I would say non-temperate species too soon inside. Now, as I mentioned, no tree needs to suffer the extremely harsh winter that we have here in Montreal. It doesn't need to suffer that for many reasons. One is because the deep frozen days don't contribute to the chilling units that it requires for dormancy, but also you have rodents, you have potential freeze thaw events in the late fall and early spring. And the worst thing that can happen to your trees is that the roots freeze, freeze, thaw with all these events. So between animals, between the uncertainty, at least here, with the freeze thaw cycles on the roots, if you have space to keep your trees, all your temperate trees in a greenhouse, then go for it. Like I said, at 2 degrees. I will eventually build a greenhouse in that area of the garden, almost to the pond, but I don't have the resources yet. So meanwhile, I convert my 3-season porch into a winter cold greenhouse, and that's what I use. Many species have continued to to photosynthesize during winter at a very low level, so it's okay to have light. But if you don't have a greenhouse or a porch that I converted as a greenhouse, and instead you have, let's say, an unheated garage, that is fine too. Even though light could contribute to the health of the tree over winter, it's not a major factor. What's more important is that it has the chilling units that it needs. Some people even have special refrigerators, which obviously are dark, and use that for their winter storage of certain species. So what do I do here with the other species? First of all, what goes into my cold greenhouse? For example, this rock planting was created this year. Eventually, all the roots will be very well established in the pot, and this will be able to stay outside over winter. But this winter, because this was created this spring, this will go into the cold greenhouse. This probably doesn't need to go into the greenhouse, but if I have space, it will go. This one also recover very well, but for example, this one I want to repot early next spring, so I will keep it in the greenhouse so I can work on it. Otherwise, if it's frozen outside, I will have to wait until I can get to it. This one will be repotted next year, but because of its size, I will keep it outside. This one here had a drastic reduction of foliage when I styled it, and this will also be repotted in a much smaller pot and in the early spring. So trees that I worked late in the season or that are somewhat weak, for example, I have also trees that are too valuable to leave it at the risk of being attacked by rodents. For example, this Picea glauca that now looks out of shape, but it's already in refinement, will go into the greenhouse. This peach pine seedlings that I will plant in the field next spring will also go into the greenhouse. All the Japanese maples for sure. Those willows, just because they're too small. And all this Yamadori here will not go into the greenhouse except for perhaps if I have space trees that were collected this year, such as this one or this one. And this pine here was collected 2 years ago, but it didn't grow the year it was the year after. Well, it was collected in September 2018. In 19 it didn't grow. In 2020 now we're here and it grew, and it's still keeping its third year foliage. It lost some, but it still has some. But I feel that this tree needs an extra push, and therefore I will keep it in the greenhouse, even though probably it doesn't need. But the interesting thing about this Yamadori is that when I collected it, I wasn't aware that it had been more severe than I thought it was. That's why it spent the first winter outside. And having spent the first winter outside, the roots had less chance to recover, and it didn't grow last year. So last winter 19 to 2020, I should have kept it inside, but yeah, I didn't. I made a mistake. Still didn't kill the tree, but ideally I should have kept it last winter indoors, and perhaps this season it would have exploded with much more growth. Now I will keep it in the greenhouse this winter, and that will help the roots and the growth next year, and afterwards it will be fine. This tuya was collected late last year, and it spent the winter indoors, and it's recovered fantastically. So the trees that are weak, that were worked too severely, for example the escarpment tuya that I will show you in a moment, they go indoor. The trees that are too valuable to live at the risk of squirrels or rabbits go indoor. Japanese pines go indoor, such as this red pine, this black pine. This is again another of my trees in refinement that look now a little bit messy because I unwired and let it do its thing. This one here will also go indoors. I did a wedge cut on a larch, and it healed properly, and now it's without wire. I'll take it indoors also, just because it's too valuable. This composition was done late in the year. The octopus mugo pine will go indoors. All these junipers, these junipers here, they were all repotted late summer here in Montreal, and they will stay outside. The ponderosa pine are too valuable to live outside due to the risk of rodents, so they will go indoors too. And the escarpment tuya here that I'll show you now also will go indoors. Here, this will go indoors because I severely decrease the amount of foliage that it had, and so it needs protection this winter. But the trees that don't go indoor, either because I don't have space or they don't need to go indoor, they're not sufficiently valuable, they're not in refinement, they will go here. And here I simply put a tarp I put all the trees next to each other. I put mulch in between, and you can see this in the video that I created last year before winter care. And I put mulch in between the pots and around the pots. This will make so that the foliage creates a buffer for the temperature and the heat that comes from the soil, with the buffer of all the foliage, creates some buffer that protects in the late fall from all the flips in the temperature. So it will take longer for the roots to go deep frozen in the late fall, and in the winter they will be in the spring they will be frozen, and this ice will protect them from the freeze thaw cycles. Once the snow comes, it will cover, and the snow is the best isolant, and it will cover everything. And the foliage, it's not a problem at all. There's no reason that the foliage should suffer in the winter. For all these temperate species, that's what they do. The foliage is exposed to the foliage, or the trunks or the branches are exposed. But if it's an extremely well ramified tree, you may have some desiccation of very fine twigging. But the advantage of having temperate trees mostly is that I don't have that problem. So my tropicals will go into my garage, tropicals in quotation mark. They will go into my garage, where I have artificial lighting, and my house has humidity control, and it stays at 35% relative humidity, and I don't see any problem with my trees, Coprosma, Cerisa. These are mostly the ones I have that are not temperate. Grevia, I have a problem with not enough light, so I will see if the additional light that I'm putting this year will be enough, but not the lack of humidity. Or, like I said, my house has 35%, but if your house doesn't have humidity control, you may need a humidifier in the room where they are kept. So my house stays at 21 degrees over winter Celsius, and constant, and I will keep them with 12 hours of artificial lighting with LED lighting, and the ones in the greenhouse will stay at 2 degrees, no artificial lighting, and the ones outside will be frozen as a block. So like I mentioned, in the fall, the foliage and the temperature from the ground will create a buffer to prevent freeze thaw on the roots. But once the really winter sets in, you will have everything frozen and like an ice cube, and late in spring, when it thaws, I'll be able to separate everything and put them back in the benches. I don't leave anything on top of the benches, obviously. But what you have to keep in mind for temperate trees is to prevent freeze thaw cycles on the roots. So I hope this short video helps. And one more thing that I want to mention: what do you do if you live in a balcony? What do you do if you don't have a garden? This is a tough one. You may have very strong winds, and it again depends on the species. There is always the very good option of wintering your trees on a specialized nursery that has a cold greenhouse for bonsai purposes. And here in Montreal, in the Montreal area, or in Quebec, there are many. Yves Letourneau, Le Bonsai Enrich is one, Bonsai Grobec is another. Like, there are many others that offer that service, private bonsai professionals that have their own greenhouses, um, and this is always an option. But if you have a balcony and you have temperate trees, I would create a box around them and put isolation that you buy in home hardware stores, used for to isolate floors, and mulch them in as if they were in the ground, and that's it. I do not suggest that you cover that. There is no way that you can keep trees at above freezing outside, and if you do, there's a big chance that you have problems with fungi or problems with overheating in the late fall, early winter, and spring. So I would rather let them freeze. The only thing that I would try to do is make sure that they don't have freeze thaw cycles. So just build a box of wood and mulch them in. And another issue that you need to keep in mind in winter is watering. Please go visit my winter care and watering tips from last year. The standard way of saying, oh, it's the surface is wet, I don't need to water, may be tricky here. So if you have any doubts, please ask me. If you can, I highly suggest that you go over to Bonsai Mirai and subscribe and watch the video that I will put out this Tuesday, and you can subscribe for free for a week, and it's highly worth to keeping your subscription. I've been a Bonsai Mirai live student for the past 3 years, almost since the beginning of their of Mirai Live. I think about 6 months after they started, actually. And I can tell you that it's the best investment that I ever did in bonsai. Again, for the price of a pot every year. It's really, there's no question how much valuable this is. So I hope this clarifies, this gives you ideas about winter care. If you're going to turn some space into a cold greenhouse, make sure you have ventilation, make sure you have humidity control and temperature control. Light is less important, but if you can, sure. And be prepared in the spring to do the bonsai shuffle at some point when the temperatures outside allow you to have extra light. So this is it for now. Thank you for watching. Until the next one, bye bye.